Business Development for Baker Tilly. We are a full-service national accounting tax advisory firm. I'm based in the Philly office, and we've got a global life science practice that works with companies throughout the entire life cycle. Early stage, preclinical, commercialization through exit. We provide accounting, tax, and other consulting services. And I've got a special fondness for this area as well. Patrick, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Hayakawa. I'm the Vice President of Innovation and Emerging Technologies with the Chester County Economic Development Council based out in Exton. They let me out today to visit the city, so happy to be out here. Our mission at the council, which is an independent not-for-profit, is to make Chester County and the surrounding region the best possible place for companies to start, grow, and thrive. And particularly in my department, our vertical is dealing with advanced technology, emerging technology, innovative companies, and entrepreneurial companies. So Chester County has a high volume of life sciences companies, and we have a lot of entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, first-time founders that come to us, and we'll spend a lot of time talking with them about funding, workspace, guidance and mentorship, key connections, what can we do to make their odds of success a little bit higher.
Nice. Thank you. Alan.
Okay, thanks. My name is Alan Katzak. I'm a partner with Tax Function Consulting. We're a corporate tax advisory firm that specializes in biotech and public and private equity-backed companies in the area. We're based in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania, and we work with a number of biotechs in the area.
Terrific. All right. Thank you, Alan. Well, perfect. Well, why don't we get started? The three of us, we had a conversation before as we were thinking about, what every founder needs to know. And, if we can cover that in about 50 minutes, I think,
everything they need to know.
Right. We can just pen this and then take this on.
Yeah.
But seriously, I think, we would cover, a handful of areas going forward. But, why don't we just dive right in? And, we are, what's, I guess the first thing you think about when you're a founder, it can be vision. But I mean, let's talk about that. Is it mindset? Is it, what do you want to create? And, Patrick, I'll just turn to you if you want to kick us off.
Or if you want to take it through commercialization, that's different than taking it through to phase 2 or phase 3 and trying to flip it.
Right.
So there's much, it's a different dynamic of what you're going to be proposing to your potential investors.
Right.
So I think that's, and operationally, I mean, where I normally get involved, that's not the sexy part of the business, but it also is something that needs to be set up as you go along. How are you going to scale? In terms of you will need, generally you start off with a small collective group of people.
Sure.
That will grow as you need. But going back to the technology aspect of it, you have something great. How do you, further develop that along the path?
So I guess to play off what both of you said, so, Patrick, as companies or founders are coming to you, are they do they have grandiose ideas? Do they see themselves being the next, I don't know, large, biotech company, come to you and say, I just want to sort of do research and then commercialize this past, give me a sense for.
If they think they're going to be the next Apple, maybe they're thinking it, but very few of them say that to me, right? We tend to see, Philadelphia is fortunate that we have a generation or more of established pharmaceutical and biotech success. So we have mature companies and we have mature academic institutions, and they're the best feeders of scientific innovation and in the corporate side of commercial success. So we tend to see a lot of people who maybe they work for one of those larger established companies, or maybe they led a department. They come to us because they're trying the entrepreneurial aspect for the first time.
Right.
And then the exercise becomes parsing out. They all bring expertise to the table, but what don't you know, or what's the part that you yourself are comfortable handling? That comes back to that vision. What do you want to be? And so they might have a lot of, just to use an example, maybe they led a cardiovascular unit. They have all the professional networks, and they understand their medicine, but they need help setting up the clinical trial, or they need help putting together a funding pitch, and then we would go from there. So typically we like to get very specific about what's the thing you're trying to do in the next month, in the next 6 months. We can talk about the grandiose plans, but what are we doing today, and how would we measure success?
No, that sounds good. And to continue on that line, so let's say, all right, so I'm a founder, and I have my vision for the company, but what's my role? We talked a little bit about this just now, but what's my role? And then talk to me about the team, and then we can also talk about when to bring in professional advice. But would love your philosophy on that. And Alan, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, as a founder, I mean, it goes back to Patrick's comment on what your background is. If you're a scientist, I mean, obviously you're going to be focused on the technology and the science aspect of it. If you're a business aspect or a business person, you're going to be focused on running the actual business of the development side of things. So from that perspective, you will have to delineate roles as they go along. But I mean, to your point, as the founder, you may be the only person that starts this thing up. I've been involved with companies where it's basically a founder and maybe some admin person, and then they scale up along the way. So a lot of the companies we deal with tend to be more virtual in nature, where they're going to outsource all of the functions, and they will continue to do that until it makes sense to bring it in-house. Some of those functions never make it in-house. Some of them are always outsourced. So a lot of, as you're starting out, you're going to have to leverage every opportunity you have to outsource specialists along the way to get you to where you need to be. And there's usually a clear path where we're spending too much money on X process. We really need to bring that in-house to save money. So that's pretty much where you, as a founder, focusing.
I'm just thinking building a team is a funny phrase because it could mean a lot of different things depending on the stage of the company or the perspective of the founder. So people might think you mean hiring people and spending the money that you've raised, and okay, I need a chief scientific officer or a chief technical officer, or I need someone to lead my clinical. I think of that as maybe I'm looking at the lens of the companies we work with, but of a more mature version of building a team. There's another angle, which is you're building your narrative, you're building your vision. Who do you ask for input? Who do you ask for help? Who do you know in your network that says that maybe they ran a life sciences startup and you can take them to coffee? Maybe you have board seats that you need to fill out, either officially or unofficially, board of advisors. So there's kind of different versions of building a team, consultative relationships. The life sciences industry around here is funny because while it's a big industry, it's very tight knit, and everyone is in it ultimately because they believe in advancing human health. So people are very generous with their time and generally very curious about, you're working on a new therapy? Tell me how it works. I'd love to hear about it. So you can get a lot of mileage, I think is my point, for our audience who might not have raised money or not be willing to build a team in that literal sense, get a lot of mileage out of thinking creatively of, if I had him, who would I talk to? And you might be surprised at how you can work the network and who you can get coffee with.
Well, no, I mean, you raise a good point. I mean, Philadelphia in this area has a really strong ecosystem for support. Whether it's academic institutions, healthcare hospitals in large pharma, just a nice ecosystem. And we've had some big successes here, so people have stuck around. And I think people innately want to help other people, and especially in entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs also are very definite in what they want to do.
They say the best way to, in life sciences, the best way to make a friend is ask for advice. I've heard many people say that, and there's a lot of truth to it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and so but you can't do it alone. You need advisors, and I think we'll touch on some of this as we go on. But at some of the academic institutions in the area, tech transfer offices, there are places to start there. And again, we will hit some of these later on, but, I think, as a founder, if you think about it, there are more people, there are more resources than you need. But, I want to go back to the team, but also advise, resources. Well, actually, I'm going to start with, board. Okay. So, what time? When do you get when do you start thinking about a board? Could be directors, advisors. Give me your thoughts or any examples you have of what a founder should be thinking about with a board.
Yes, I mean, ultimately, I don't think it's ever too soon to get advisors. I mean, ultimately, you're going to need advisors to help you guide through the process. There's a lot going on. The technology aspect of it alone, and making sure you have what you need to support and defend your IP rights, is enough alone to obviously warrant advice. I personally don't ever think it's too soon to ask for advice, and there's enough people in the area, enough groups to get involved with, that you can find somebody that has been there, done that, and can advise you. Well, that's not the path they would choose again if they had to do it again, or there may be better alternatives. So I guess my point is, it's never too early to get advisors. A board, I don't know. I guess it would be indicative of kind of when you really need the formality of a board. Because a lot of these organizations are going to run very nimble. And may not have formal board meetings to kind of vote on specific items. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you'll see companies at varying stages do both. I've seen companies with a formal board of directors, but maybe if you're not mature, you're not ready to make those commitments. And there's tons of blogs people can look about what does that mean? What should I be prepared to offer? What should I be prepared to ask of my board? But a board of advisors, you can have both, or you can have one and not the other yet. And I think people, like Alan said, it's never too early to ask for advice. I think one false assumption I see founders make is that I got to keep this close to the chest, and I can't tell people. And well, maybe I'll talk to you about being on my board, but can you sign this first, or how? And I think that's a misguided. This is not legal advice. I'm not an attorney, right? But in general, I wouldn't be shy about telling people, here's what I'm working on. Generally, I'm looking for smart advisors. I'm open to board members. And then that is what spreads like wildfire. And the best, most successful board advisor hookups I've seen, the entrepreneur didn't go into the meeting thinking, oh, I've got a big meeting with Alan and I've got to have him. They went in thinking, oh, Rob said Alan's a good guy to talk to, and we had one talk and another, and wow, Alan actually has experience I didn't realize, and he's been really helpful, and he was kind of a de facto advisor before we gave him the board advisor term. That's a nice way to do it. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, you raise a good point, and everyone, you may need some different types of assistance depending on who you are. You may need business help. You may need someone who has industry experience and contacts. And you're right, it doesn't have to be a formal board, but as long as you're open to. Right, I remember being in pitch meetings and people would make you sign NDAs beforehand, and it was always a red flag because so much of it is execution risk. I mean, it's one thing to be able to talk about it; it's another thing to be able to do it. So, you have to get over that fear a little bit.
One comment I'll say about NDAs is if the people that you're asking to sign an NDA are the caliber of the people that you want to give you advice, then they're getting that request. They're meeting startups all day, every day. So the people who there's this inverse relationship of the more valuable their input, the less time and interest they have in signing an NDA. Because if they're meeting 100 companies a year and they say, I got to sign an NDA, they're going to say out of self-preservation, what if on the off chance I meet with you and then 6 months later someone who has an idea tangential, it's just not a thing that, and from my experience, people who advise a lot of companies in that high volume are eager to do it. It's a red flag, as you said.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's continue on this and talk about professional advisors. I mean, we talked about attorneys, accountants, or at least we've touched on that. And I mean, I'll give you my philosophy. I mean, Alan, as you said, it's never too early to engage those people, those resources. On the attorney side, there are plenty of firms out there, large firms, smaller firms. A lot of them have emerging company practices, and oftentimes you'll be able to, or entrepreneurs will be able to, I don't want to say strike a deal, but I guess engage in a alternative financing arrangement or fee arrangement because, founders don't have, cash is scarce. So they understand, and, there are ways around that. So, I think just one tip I have, talk to everyone, but, ask around, and you want to meet with a few people and make sure you're comfortable with that person. I think the same goes for other areas as well. But any comments on that?
You need to get the advice that's applicable to your industry. So, where I see a lot of companies go is they have somebody knows an attorney that knows somebody, and they're using a divorce attorney to draft their agreements.
Right.
That's not necessarily the best situation for pharmaceuticals because they're very specific. So the small companies, even though they're small, they need specific advice that are, and it matters. And it will matter when it matters.
Right.
And you don't want to be wrong in that aspect, and you can't be. So for purposes of identifying the right advisor, make sure they know the industry.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest advice, for choosing advisor, whether it's law, legal, whether it's tax, whether it's account, whatever it is, choose somebody that understands that industry, not somebody who's, they do it sometimes. It's not something that is their core focus.
Yeah, totally. And I would add, in addition to the importance of them having the subject matter expertise and not making those mistakes on the contracts or the actual work that they're doing, if you get someone who is in the network, so many times getting a good attorney, getting a good life sciences accounting practice, they'll know. You're saying, I'm so lonely, I've got my little island here. All I have is an attorney, someone who does my taxes. They will be the first people to open doors and say, okay, you got to talk to so-and-so. So it kind of gets you doors open that you would, or into a world that you otherwise wouldn't. I would also say, because I know we have people who are not yet company formed or thinking about it, I would say don't shy away. Say, oh, well, I'm so little, I'm so young, I can't afford those well-known, more and more of those companies are being really progressive and innovative about working with young companies. They're hosting workshops, they're doing consultation, they're going to mixers. So, be the squeaky wheel that asks and goes, and then you never know where it leads.
Yeah. Well, and that goes to what every life science entrepreneur needs to know. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to know everyone. You just need to know who to ask,
get started,
how to ask, and get started.
Keep asking.
Right. Yeah. Maybe you're an attorney can make some introductions. Maybe your accountant can. Maybe your tax person. Maybe one of your colleagues at an academic institution. Really, really all over the place. And I guess I will touch on two things. Alan, you brought this up: team and outsourcing versus hiring a full-time staff. Do you want to give any insights into thought processes there?
Yeah, I'll start. With regards to hiring a team, obviously the expense of hiring a full-time person and versus the need of that full-time person. Right. So usually a lot of the startups that we typically deal with do not have full-time, whether it's a lawyer, whether, general counsel, for whatever matter, it's really, when you start up, you have to conserve cash.
Right.
Generally the companies raise money and they write checks. That's pretty much the role, and obviously they want to fund their development along the way instead of just pay overhead fees. So from that perspective, it's usually not until you climb you get through the staging, the process, the clinical process, and you get further down the line where you prove that this thing is going to work, that you start hiring full-time people, whether it's your medical staff, your clinical staff, et cetera. And obviously the overhead staff kind of comes after the fact once you fill that need out. So it's really need-based, and you don't. I recommend not spending. And in today's day and age, it's an outsourced economy. For the most part, a lot of the companies we work with, it doesn't matter if the person's across the country or whatever. They're doing work at a company. Many of the clients we deal with have, clients have employees in different locations because that is the right person for them to work.
Interesting. Right. So actually, being in a physical location is less applicable.
I don't think in today's day and age, no. Because it's just it is what it is. But yeah, so geographic location, I think, has less importance than it used to in the past.
Sure.
I would only add, Alan got it right when you say, what are your needs? If you're a good life sciences startup, life sciences is such a milestones-driven industry. So if you've done a good strategic plan, you've made your investor pitch, and you've said to them, by such and such date, we're going to have such and such outcomes for such and such data, then your hiring decisions, whether it's insourced or outsourced or whatever, will be built on that. What are you trying to do and when? Is that a function that can be done most economically, most efficiently by someone in-house that we have their devoted attention and they're local and we can talk? Or is it something that we can send out to a CRO or somebody? But it's got to be driven by what the plan, a clear and meaningful development plan.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Well, why don't we shift gears a little bit and let's talk about financing and funding your business. I mean, any entrepreneur, it's going to take a lot of money to build your business, but life sciences in particular. I mean, you're talking about whether it's medical device, drug development, therapy, you name it. It's just much more of a capital-intensive business. So fundraising, while I'm sure there is the exception where people have bootstrapped this, you can do it only to a certain point, and credit cards only last a certain amount of time, and your wife's significant other, husband, there's only so much runway you could have there. So I will just give kind of a short overview on the types of funding, the sort of stages and the sources, and then just open it up to give some thoughts on that. So, again, typically this is not there's not one blueprint for this, but typically companies will have seed investment, and that's at the earliest stages of the life cycle. Maybe an idea, just a business plan, even a concept, but not a product yet. And this is funding from, could be friends and family, could be from quasi-governmental group, which will provide some names, and then or it could be just yourself. But it's really early stages, high risk. There's also federal grants in there as well. But then there's angel funding. So angels are high net worth individuals, put in their own money. Again, early stage, high risk, but they're looking for a return. So you have to be, and that's could be sub 1 million, could be a little more. But again, there are angel groups or angel groups out there that will help with that. Then there's venture capital. So there's Series A, B, and C, but that's typically the first institutional round. Professional investors with money from other investors to invest in certain types of companies. So again, there's a lot of money out there, and each have different requirements. And of course, with that, an investor will want a seat on the board. Or they're going to dig in and actually get into the science and get into the business. So you'll have to be prepared. Sources of capital. We haven't talked about SBIR grants or federal grants. I'm sure a lot of the audience or listeners understand academic grants. There is a large pool of money out there for companies looking to commercialize their technologies. That's the SBIR and STTR. And that's given out by federal agencies, and that's non-dilutive funding. So you can get that; it'll help commercialize it, and you're not giving any equity. And then the other funding, the angel money that comes with they want to return, and there's going to be milestones driven, and the same with venture capital. There's going to be milestones that you have to hit. They're going to want say on major decisions, and they're going to want to see the table. But again, those people can bring contacts, money, mentorship. And again, I hope I'm stolen anyone's thunder here, but
that was
my groundwork. And now let's begin. I would love your thoughts on financing and any experience you or your companies have had with that.
Go ahead.
I mean, we could probably do, maybe BioStrategy is already done or is planning, we could probably do 3 sessions on financing. I think you're smart to break it up into basically dilutive and non-dilutive. One comment I'll make on that, because based on who I think our audience is people thinking about dipping the toe in the water entrepreneurship or are recently formed, I think angel financing and dilutive funding is something that that gets press, and we tend to see that's what the big companies do, or that's what the big boys do. So people go and say, okay, I'm ready to go raise money. And what we should say when you're raising money, you're taking on, you're borrowing money. So you haven't you haven't made $5 million, you borrowed $5 million, and maybe you gave up equity, and maybe it was debt or convertible note, but you didn't create anything. So my point in saying that is, don't brush over the non-dilutive funding. That is king. If you can get cash, you can get free money, whether it's through a grant, that'll only make you so much more attractive to investors down the road when you say, oh, I was able to get to this first milestone. I thought I was going to have to take on debt or such and such to do it, but I was able to do it with an SBIR or an STTR or a state grant or an academic grant. I would say do good homework on knowing what's out there. For example, the state of Pennsylvania runs free webinars, free seminars on how they can help Pennsylvanian entrepreneurs get their share of those federal dollars for the SBIR. There's consultants, there's all sorts of resources out there. So I would say if you're early, you're saying, what do I do? Give a good hard look at that before you start asking other people for money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess this goes back to kind of our earlier discussion point of kind of start with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is your exit plan? Because I mean, I don't know of any investor that's going to give money without expecting a return on their money. Right? I mean, I don't think it exists. But the dilutive funding, to the extent that it comes on, I mean, you're going to have to prove the value of the company. I mean, you may have up rounds, down rounds, along the way. I mean, it's a roller coaster for most of these companies as they go through the clinical process. You may have a hiccup in your clinical development along the way. So you have to, but ultimately, I think your path forward has to be relatively consistent of what it's going to take. What I've generally seen is, okay, it's going to take us this amount of money to get us to phase 1, phase 2, so on and so forth along the clinical path. To the extent, and you have to have that weighted. So I mean, the one area you did say is, the IPO process, but it's an incredibly expensive and time-consuming process. It's not something that is done. Generally you see, at least in the earlier rounds of friends and family, and then usually some type of investor comes in to fund that, whether it's debt or equity, in terms of that. But debt usually comes with a higher interest rate, and equity is pretty dilutive. So I mean, you got to look at that from that perspective. But without cash infusion, probably not going to get very far either. So
Right.
those are the kind of that's kind of the rock and hard place you're put in between.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, it needs to get it forward. You're going to have to choose with which path you're going to go down. So.
One other, since I talked a little bit about non-dilutive, one thing in our limited time I'll say about actual fundraising or making a pitch. One thing that rings true whether you're raising $500,000 or $50 million is simply do your homework. And what I mean by that is know who your audience is. If you have your sights on an angel, know what they've invested in or what they're interested in, or do some research. If you have your eye on a group, know what their criteria are. If you have your eye on a strategic partner, know what have they done in your space. So you'll be, as a founder or as a pitch person, you'll be expected not just to know the ins and outs of your company, but you need to be a subject matter expert on your whole vertical, on your whole. If you've got something in oncology, you need to be speaking with intelligence about the recent, who's the competition, what's the deal action, how are you different, how does that apply to you or not. So the worst thing you can do is go into an investor meeting and say, I think I've got what you need, and they from what you say, they can tell you either don't know who we are or don't know who you are, and there's not a fit here. So, and that's it. Those are unforced errors.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Know your audience, because listen, there's a lot of dollars out there right now. I think even more so these days. And know your audience, know who you're talking to, and be prepared for it. They've got angel investors and venture capital funds. They look at 600 to 1,000 deals a year, and maybe they'll do 6.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't know, they'll tell pretty quickly.
Yeah.
If you know what they're interested in, or if they have an interest, they'll move on to someone else.
Right.
And I mean, we could spend days talking about this, but it's all important, and it's all telling your story, and being prepared.
And I think further on that, I mean, you're going to find the venture capital and the private equity groups that are focused on specific diseases, disease states. I mean, that is, if you have an oncology drug, you don't want to go to a gas. I mean, so on and so forth. You want to focus on where potentially they're going to understand your business and more importantly be willing to invest in it.
Yeah.
So you got to know. I mean, going back to your point, target your audience of who is, and to the earlier point of the competition, they may be your acquirer.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I mean that's something down the road. I mean, if they're you have something that is that they would want, you have to look at them that they may potentially want your drug down the road.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot more investors, like Novartis or Pfizer investing in companies early stage, and they may not be the final acquirer, but there's certainly interest there.
And to that point, there's a lot of again, usually this is further along in the clinical cycle where it's proof of concept not an issue. I mean, it's further down the line, does it work, and how are they progressing through the trials on the studies? But usually a lot of these companies will throw in an option to buy these companies at a future date. I mean, so the option money usually funds the, but again, knowing who that might be is important.
Yeah.
Because if, you have to bring that to their attention, you can go along that way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a potential source of funding. Now, obviously, it is dilutive and you have a lockup with it, and it's a massive transaction, but it's something to be considered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny. I think we've talked a lot, but I want to get into some details. I want to get into, not that we haven't talked details, but I want to talk names. Well, let's start dropping. Where can founders get, where can they get help? I mean, Patrick, you mentioned with SBIRs, there's the Innovation Partnership, which is the statewide partnership to help companies go after federal grants. There's Ben Franklin Technology Partners, which is a statewide organization designed to provide services to early stage companies. But Patrick, you work with one, but let's just start name dropping.
Yeah, where can you get help? So as you said earlier, Philadelphia has a vibrant ecosystem. I think that word's overused, but it's kind of true. It's there's people with different roles. So if you're an academic institution, they will probably have a tech transfer office. That's an easy kind of low-hanging starting place that they should be able to give you guidance or triage out from there. I know this organization, BioStrategy Partners, has great relationships with the academic and research institutions, and they also have great relationships with folks like Baker Tilly and kind of the industrial side or the industry side. My organization is kind of a rare bird because we're a private economic development agency, and we have a department devoted to helping first-time entrepreneurs and advanced technology companies. So my point is, if you can look at your county, because often economic development is part of county government or city government, whatever the case may be. So you can look there, even if you're not in Chester County, they can call us. But I think it's Ben Franklin, it's the state, it's folks like BioStrategy. We reference starting with your attorney later. Start with kind of who you know, and then there's the World Wide Web, which unlocks even more doors. But Alan.
Yeah, I think I just echo most of those. I mean, I can't emphasize enough of the advisors because a lot of times they're in touch with funding sources that you wouldn't think of that may be available.
That's right.
I mean, everything you mentioned, obviously, and also just knocking on a lot of doors, seeing which ones are open to a discussion.
No, and to build on that, right? Ben Franklin, they give money, but they don't give money.
Oh, they do. I should call them.
There's some attachments to that, but they're very good for early stage. But they could also provide advice too, and connections. And I know the Science Center is another their organization, and then their accelerators in the area. But again, it is leverage your network and talk to people who have been in your shoes before.
There's meetups. So for example, so you mentioned the Science Center. So someone would say, okay, well, I'm not a tenant at the Science Center. I don't know anyone who at the Science Center. What do I do? So you could go online. A lot of these places, they want to help people like you, right? So in the Science Center example, I think it's every Thursday evening they'll have a venture cafe, and I'm sure all over the city there's meetups, and then you can go to meetup.com and you'll see, type in life sciences, and you'll see a dozen or more groups.
Nice. Trying to think what. We've talked about groups. We've talked about financing. Let's talk about, I guess, location. That falls in. Where can a company start? You know, can they be? It can be remote. They could, you know, I guess lease space somewhere. But you know, where do you see founders starting up?
Yeah. Go ahead, Alan.
I mean, it's really, I mean, the science side. I mean, there's a whole bunch of places that you can participate in and get, you know, space. It depends on what you need.
Yeah.
I can't stress enough not committing to a big lease payment
Yeah.
right out of the gate. I mean, you don't need a huge office space to fund your development. I mean, that's, you know, so ultimately I think you look for as many opportunities you have that will fund them or, you know, assist with that along the way.
Yeah.
And then when you're at that point where you actually do need office space, you look at that. So location, you know, it's really going to be the convenience of usually the founder, wherever they're
That's
at.
the number one prediction.
Yeah.
Where does the CEO live or want to live? Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'll give you an example because you said let's get specific. So here's a funny one. So there's a company, a biotech company called Navigen that was using space out of St. Joseph's University. So again, if you're tied to a university, they've got labs. See, maybe they already have a program where you say, ooh, we don't need dedicated bench, you know, 5 days a week, but can we get in? And so that's what they did. And they had an arrangement where I think they were on faculty or they were doing some work with the students, and they were kind of giving back in that way. So then they kind of grew that. They called us because we had worked with them on some other projects, and we happened to be helping Cheney University, which you guys might know out in southern Chester County, not known as a biotech, you know, epicenter of the world, just happened to be setting up a lab for industrial use, and they were looking for corporate partners and all sorts of stuff, and Navigen got exactly what they needed. So you kind of got to look under, you know, it goes back to what you said, use your network, talk to your advisors, tell people what you need, and think about what are you trying to do. This is a beautiful building here that people should know about too. So we got there's things popping up all over.
No, those are good points. Let's see, you know, how about some common, you know, and again, let's go to some examples here. You know, common pitfalls or, you know, hindrances to growth. You know, where do you see people stumbling at all? And you know, I hate to, I feel like people or founders often fall into similar traps. But how do they get out of them? You know, can you? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but any examples of, you know, oh, this one I see this often.
You know what I mean? Again, it goes back to finding the right people that can help out. So some of the pitfalls that I see is, you know, some of the opportunities, at least from a tax perspective, that a lot of companies miss out on is, you know, there's a payroll tax credit.
Yeah.
To the extent that they can take, it's up to $250,000 a year in lieu of the R&D credit.
Right.
Or the R&D credit offsets the payroll tax. That's real cash. So the federal government realized that a lot of that cash was sitting on people's tax returns, companies' tax returns, without any benefit ever. So, you know, they put that in play basically to say, you know, FICA taxes, you know, so that's a true cash savings that the company can recognize. Ultimately, monetizing any opportunity you have. I mean, Pennsylvania offers a Pennsylvania R&D tax credit that is saleable. So from that perspective, I've seen some of our clients go that route of saying, you know what, we'll take, you know, we'll prepare the credit calculation. It's generated, you know, basically it's recalculated by the state of Pennsylvania. They give you generally a prorated credit based on there's a large and small business. That's something that should be taken advantage of and, you know, monetized to the extent that it can be. And again, knowing your players, you know, from the perspective of, I'll say, operationally tax and accounting focused, payroll tax ends up being a big problem for most of these companies. A lot of these companies are generally, they start out small and they get complex very quickly. So, you know, with equity compensation, with just different arrangements, there's just, they're not the typical small company because of the nature of the business that they're in. So it ends up being, you know, and you can get into some serious trouble where you have to you know, unwind a lot of things along the way. So it's better to have a conversation, somebody who has been there and at least can advise on, you know, all these aspects of with scalability in mind. Because that aspect of it, the intent is you may start off with 3 or 4 people, but obviously if you want to grow, you're going to be complex at some point in time, probably sooner rather than later. So most of the companies we work with, it's it's the hockey stick of like kind of hiring, and you're like, okay, next thing you know, we have 30 people. Now we have 200.
Right.
And it could be something great from hiring a sales force, or your clinical team just has to grow because you now have all these requirements, all this work as you progress through the process.
Yeah.
So,
You're scaling quickly. For
yeah.
Sure.
So scalability is key in my mind. I mean, it's kind of you don't plan for just today. Plan for a couple of years out the road of okay, here's what we're doing now. So when I work with a lot of our clients, we may get in a situation where they may be kind of a bad fit for the provider they have. So we have to find, a right provider that's going to be able to get, and a lot of the, benefits, for example, compensation is a big area. I mean,
Sure.
Philadelphia may be a great area, but you're attracting talent. You have to obviously, obviously knowing kind of what you should be paying that talent.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're not going to attract them to your company. So equity compensation generally is kind of the key in the smaller pharma companies, just because that's the carrot, for them to join the company.
Right.
Otherwise, they could rely, stay with a larger, more stable company.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
I'll add, it's made some great points on the tax there, where companies can get tripped up, or the tax and financial stuff. It's tough because you can't go back in time and get some of those back. So you mentioned the R&D tax credit. The Keystone Innovation Tax Credit is another example. That's a non-dilutive state-level tax credit, a sellable tax credit, but it's based on your physical location within a Keystone Innovation zone, and it's an 8-year credit. So we have clients that have been able to get over 7 or 8 years, $700,000, $800,000 of non-dilutive funding. That's cash. They can put it back into the business. They can pay themselves. They can pay their rent. But if you say you wanted lab space, you needed an office, and you didn't know about the zone, you signed a 3-year lease. And I've seen cases where if you're on this side of the street, you're in the zone, you're on that side of the street, you're not in the zone. And same in every other way. And you can't go back and say, we want the credit now. You get 8 years from your birthday as a company, and that's gone. So that's a painful pitfall that can be avoided by, as you say, talking to good experts and a planful approach.
Yeah, we had a client come to us, and I mean, you're right. You always love this one. This person had done this before. He came to us. He's like, I worked at a few startups before. I want to make sure that we are, our books are in order now. That we are recording all journal entries. I want to do this online. At our stage, we can probably close the books every quarter. I want to do it every month because I want to prepare for the eventual, additional financing, bringing on more people. There's some possible technical accounting issues like revenue recognition. How do I recognize these contracts? It's just, beyond their scope, and they need to be focused on, all right, executing their vision, driving the mission, talking to, developing the product, talking to potential customers, and obviously the fundraising process. We didn't even touch how that's a full-time job.
Yeah.
So, but just to play off what you're saying, get your house in order. It's never too early to get your house in order. And so when this person came to me, he left the meeting. I'm like, oh, how great!
Yeah.
How great is this?
If only they were all
right. They were all like this. So again, I encourage anyone listening, come to us early.
Yeah, that's right.
Good. Do we want to do any questions? Or we?
You folks did a very thorough job because of the questions that appeared from the audience were questions that you folks addressed.
Did we really? Look at that.
All right.
Telepathy in action.
There was a mic here.
Yeah.
Do we have a minute for a final thought?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Okay. So why don't we talk final thoughts? Alan, would you like to start?
Just to reiterate, getting the right. From a tax perspective, I don't come to a tax advisor after you have done something, because it's usually at that point in time it's too late. It could be, may not be, but a lot of times you made an election, you've done something that is kind of binding, and you're not going to get out of it. So unfortunately, a lot of times my situation is just saying, I'm sorry that didn't happen, but I wish I would have been aware of the equity. The financing and all that's a very complex area, and it's something that tax needs to be involved with because there are tax implications of shifting within the company and a lot of the tax attributes to the extent that they could be preserved. you have to monetize whatever you can monetize. So you have to be willing to do whatever it takes. But I can't stress enough of at least getting advisors involved. At least speaking with somebody. If you don't understand it yourself, you're going to need to bring somebody in that does, and sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
If I were going to wrap it up, I would say I always feel kind of funny in these situations where people say, well, what's the right way to do it? And the truth is every company is different, and these entrepreneurs or companies, it's good to be coachable, it's good to be open to advice and ask, but at the end of the day, only they have the company that they have, only they have that technology, and they're going to have a vision and make the decision. So I guess my last closing thought would be, don't shy away from that. The best founders kind of own that, and you got to be adaptive, but ultimately they have to be empowered to call the shots. And people like us, you could ask 4 different panels and they'll give you 4 different answers, even if they're right answers and with good experience, but you got to chart your own path, and that's why it's hard. If everyone could do it, everyone would be doing it, but they're not. So that would be the last thought that I really leave you with.
No, perfect. That sounds good. And again, I will not reiterate what these fine gentlemen have said, but just remember, tap into the ecosystem, and don't be afraid to ask for help. There's more resources out there than you and I know, which is interesting. But no, I want to thank you both. This was enjoyable.
Thank you.
Hope this was valuable for people listening and watching.
Great.
So
Thank
on
you.
behalf of BioStrategy Partners and our entire audience, thank you for your time. And Alan, Patrick, Rob, great to have you folks. Great way to kick off the new year.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.